Chosen one. I know you are tired of worrying about money. I repeat, you are tired of worrying about money. Not because you love money, not because you chase wealth, but because you are exhausted from carrying financial pressure that keeps pulling your spirit out of rest. You are not here by accident. You did not click this video randomly. Heaven aligned this moment with precision because something in you is ready to shift. Anointed one, you are standing at the edge of a supernatural transition. This is not a message about hustle numbers or getting rich. This is a prophetic confirmation that you have reached a stage where survival is no longer meant to dominate your life. The scripture says, though the vision tarries, wait for it will surely come, as written in Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 3. What you feel stirring right now is not impatience, it is preparation. Chosen one, passive income is not about greed. It is about creating space for your spirit to breathe again. It is about removing the noise so you can hear God clearly, move freely, and live without constant anxiety. If you listen all the way through this message, you will not be told what to do. You will recognize what you already know. Peace will settle. Clarity will rise. Before we go deeper, subscribe so you stay connected to this flow. In the comments, write the amount of passive income you dream of each year and type 777 as a sign that you know this word was meant for you. Chosen one. There is something you must understand before we talk about systems, ideas, or structures. What you are experiencing right now is not failure, and it is not a lack of faith. The pressure you feel around money is not proof that you are unaligned. It is proof that you have outgrown a season that once sustained you. There is clearly something else happening beneath the surface of your life. Not a new job, not another hustle, not working harder or longer until your spirit goes numb. Heaven is not calling you into exhaustion. Heaven is calling you into alignment. And alignment always begins with removing what keeps your soul in survival mode. You were never meant to exchange your days for money forever. That model may work for the masses, but it suffocates the chosen. When your spirit is wired for depth, for discernment, for impact, constant financial anxiety becomes a form of spiritual interference. I know this because I lived there. I remember praying deeply, thinking clearly, sensing God strongly, yet feeling this low-grade tension every time a bill arrived or time ran out. It wasn't greed, it was grief. Grief that so much inner clarity was being trapped inside an outer structure that could not hold it. That is when I realized passive income is not a money concept. It is a peace concept. Passive income at its core is not about getting rich while doing nothing. It is about allowing provision to flow without draining your presence. It is money that does not demand your anxiety. It is income that does not ask you to betray your rhythm. When Scripture speaks of rest, it is not laziness, it is alignment. There is a kind of provision that arrives when effort stops being the source and obedience becomes the channel. You are not being called to chase money. You are being called to stop leaking energy. One of the first ways this shows up is through ownership rather than labor. When you own something that produces, you are no longer trapped in constant output. This is why certain forms of investing exist. Not speculation, not gambling, but ownership in things that outlive your daily attention. I remember the first time money entered my account without my direct involvement. It wasn't a large amount, but something shifted internally. It felt like proof that my life no longer had to be held hostage by hours. That moment didn't make me ambitious, it made me calm. And calm is where discernment lives. There is wisdom in systems that reward patience and consistency. When you place your resources into structures that are built to endure, what you are really doing is practicing trust. Not blind trust, but trained trust. The kind that understands sustainability matters more than speed. Too many people are drawn to what looks impressive but collapses under time. The chosen are taught differently. Longevity matters, faithfulness matters, quiet growth matters. That is why not every opportunity is for you. Some things pay loudly but cost you peace. And yet I also know many of you are listening and thinking, that sounds beautiful, but I don't have access to place anywhere. Hear me clearly. Heaven never demands what you do not yet have. When money is limited, time becomes the seed, and time when aligned is powerful. There was a season where all I had was knowledge, experience, and an understanding of patterns I had lived through. At first, I treated those things as ordinary. Then I realized people were asking me questions I answered without effort. That was not coincidence. That was inventory. Many chosen ones are sitting on value they have never packaged because they were taught to trade minutes instead of building assets. When you teach document guide or create once and allow it to serve many, you are no longer selling your presence. You are extending it. This is not about becoming visible for attention. It is about becoming accessible without depletion. The internet, for all its noise, allows this kind of multiplication. A message recorded once can serve someone while you sleep. That is not manipulation. That is stewardship. I have seen people burn out doing good work because their income demanded constant performance. I have also seen people come alive when they built something that worked quietly in the background. The difference is not intelligence, it is structure. When you build something that can operate without your constant input, you give your nervous system permission to rest. And when the nervous system rests, the spirit leads again. There is also a calling on some of you to speak, to write, to create, not for fame, but for translation. You see things others miss. You sense shifts before they arrive. That awareness is not meant to stay locked inside you. But understand, this creation is not easy. It asks for discipline, patience, and humility. It will stretch you. Yet the very difficulty becomes the filter. The harder something is to sustain, the fewer people will commit to it. And that is often where provision hides. I remember days where creating felt invisible. No applause, no immediate return. But slowly, something began to compound. Each piece became an asset. Each moment of clarity was stored somewhere beyond my immediate view. And then one day, what once took effort began to return flow. Not overnight, but steadily, faithfully. That is how most divine provision moves. Quietly at first, then consistently. Chosen one, hear this gently. Not every path is for you, and you do not need all of them. Heaven does not overwhelm, it confirms. As you listen, notice what resonates without strain. Notice what feels like recognition rather than pressure. That is how alignment speaks. The goal is not to do everything. The goal is to build something that allows you to stop worrying so your spirit can stay present. This is the first truth you must anchor into. Money is not meant to command you. It is meant to serve what you are called to carry. When that order is restored, anxiety loses its grip. And when anxiety loosens, clarity returns. Sit with that. Let it settle. Because the next layer builds on this foundation, and without it, nothing else will hold. Chosen one. There is another layer to this that many never see, and it is the reason so many spiritually aware people stay trapped in cycles of worry. It is not a lack of opportunity. It is not a lack of intelligence. It is an internal agreement, often unconscious, that says, if I stop striving, everything will collapse. That belief does not come from God. It comes from conditioning, and until it is broken, no amount of strategy will bring peace. I had to confront this myself. There was a season where even when provision appeared, I could not rest. Money came in, but my body stayed tense. I realized then that anxiety does not disappear when numbers increase. Anxiety disappears when identity is corrected. Many anointed people believe they must suffer financially to remain humble, pure, or spiritually acceptable. But humility is not insecurity, and purity is not poverty. When Jesus spoke about peace, he was not describing a future reward. He was describing a present posture. Peace that surpasses understanding does not arrive after the bills are paid. It arrives when trust is restored. Passive income, when understood correctly, is not about escaping work. It is about removing fear from your decision-making. When fear is present, you say yes to things you were never meant to carry. You stay in environments that drain you. You delay obedience because survival is too loud. But when provision becomes predictable, your spirit finally has room to speak again. That is not indulgence. That is alignment. There is a reason Scripture speaks often about stewardship rather than accumulation. Stewardship assumes flow. Accumulation assumes lack. When you build systems that allow resources to circulate without constant effort, you are practicing stewardship. You are saying, I trust God enough to build something that does not require panic to sustain. That trust is tested not when money is scarce, but when it starts to arrive quietly and consistently. Because then you must choose whether to expand your peace or your appetite. Some of you have been resisting this stage because it feels unfamiliar. You know how to survive, you know how to stretch, you know how to wait, but you do not yet know how to receive without guilt. That is why heaven introduces provision gradually, not to tease you, but to train you. The transition from survival to sustainability requires a renewal of the mind. It requires letting go of the identity that equates worth with effort. Effort has its place, but it is not the source. There are practical expressions of this alignment: ownership over output, systems over scrambling, assets over exhaustion. But hear this carefully, the form matters less than the posture. Two people can do the same thing and experience entirely different outcomes. One is anxious, chasing, attached. The other is steady, patient, observant. One leaks energy, the other compounds it. The difference is not the method, it is the inner state. I remember building something that took months with no visible return. Friends questioned it. Logic questioned it. But something in my spirit stayed calm. Not excited, not frantic. Calm. And when it began to produce, it did so without drama. That was the sign. Provision that arrives without drama carries peace. Provision that arrives with chaos demands more than it gives. Many of you are being called to simplify, not expand. To remove noise, not add tasks. Passive income is often born when you stop adding and start refining. When you take what already works and allow it to work without you hovering over it. This requires restraint. It requires trust. It requires believing that you are not the glue holding everything together. God is not impressed by burnout. He is honored by obedience that knows when to rest. There is also discernment required in what you build. Not everything profitable is permissible for you. Some streams carry spiritual weight you are not meant to manage. That is why alignment matters more than speed. If something produces money but disrupts your peace, it is too expensive. If something demands constant attention and leaves no room for stillness, it will eventually cost you clarity. Chosen ones are not exempt from success, but they are accountable for how they carry it. This is where patience becomes a form of power. To build something slowly, sustainably, without the rush to prove anything. The world glorifies acceleration. Heaven honors timing. When something is built in the right season, it does not require force to maintain. I have watched people gain quickly and lose just as fast because their inner structure could not hold what arrived. I have also watched others grow quietly and remain steady because their foundation was prepared. You are not behind. You are being positioned. The delay you resented was insulation. The lack that frustrated you was instruction. You were learning what does not work so you could recognize what does. That wisdom is part of your provision. Do not dismiss it. The systems you are called to build will reflect the lessons you paid for in private. And hear this with compassion: you do not need permission to stop worrying. Worry is not a badge of responsibility. It is a sign of misplaced trust. When Jesus said to seek first the kingdom, he was not dismissing material needs. He was reordering priority. When the inner order is corrected, the outer follows. Passive income in its truest form is simply provision that has learned to obey order. As you listen, notice what feels heavy and what feels light. Lightness does not mean easy. It means aligned. Heavy does not mean wrong, but it may mean premature. Let your spirit lead. Let peace be the confirmation. You are not being rushed. You are being invited. This stage is not about doing more. It is about doing what remains when fear is removed. When anxiety steps aside, wisdom speaks. And wisdom, when followed, builds quietly, steadily, faithfully. Let that settle. Let it reframe how you see money, effort, and rest. Because when rest becomes possible, everything else begins to organize itself around truth. Chosen one. There comes a moment in every spiritually aware life where God stops removing obstacles and starts removing excuses. Not excuses spoken out loud, but the quiet ones we carry internally. The ones that sound responsible. The ones that sound humble. The ones that say, now is not the time, or I'll focus on money later, or I just need to survive this season first. What feels like wisdom can sometimes be fear dressed in patience. And fear, no matter how spiritual it sounds, will always keep you small. I remember a season when I told myself I was waiting on clarity. In truth, clarity had already arrived. What I was waiting on was permission to move without certainty. That is the tension chosen ones often face. You are intuitive. You are discerning. You like confirmation. But alignment does not always arrive with full visibility. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet nudge that refuses to go away. Passive income for many of you is that nudge. Not because you crave comfort, but because your spirit is tired of negotiating with survival. There is a spiritual cost to financial instability that few people talk about. It fragments your attention. It shortens your patience. It makes you reactive instead of responsive. Even when you pray, part of your mind is calculating. Even when you rest, part of you is bracing. That constant low-level vigilance dulls discernment over time. And the enemy does not need to destroy you if he can simply distract you long enough. That is why provision matters, not as a reward, but as protection. Passive income becomes holy when it restores your ability to listen. When money no longer shouts, God's voice becomes clearer. You begin to notice subtleties again. You stop rushing decisions. You choose differently. I noticed this shift when I no longer had to say yes out of urgency. When a door opened, I could pause. When an opportunity appeared, I could test it. That space between stimulus and response is where wisdom lives, and wisdom is what sustains increase. Some of you are afraid that if you stop worrying, you will stop striving, and if you stop striving, you will stop growing. But growth does not come from pressure, it comes from alignment. The soil does not strain to produce fruit. It receives, then responds. That is the model you were created for. Effort has its place, but it is not meant to be constant. Even Scripture speaks of seasons of sowing and seasons of reaping. The chosen often get stuck sowing endlessly because they feel undeserving of harvest. Let me say this clearly: rest does not mean you are done. It means you are ready. Ready to steward without fear. Ready to build without panic. ready to receive without shame. Many anointed people sabotage their own provision because they have never healed their relationship with money. They associate money with control loss or corruption, but money is neutral. It amplifies what already exists. If fear is present, it amplifies fear. If peace is present, it amplifies peace. That is why inner work always precedes sustainable income. Before systems stabilize externally, identity must stabilize internally. You must know who you are without the struggle. You must learn to stand without the pressure. Otherwise, even passive income becomes another thing to manage anxiously. I have seen people create income streams only to micromanage them into exhaustion, not because the systems were flawed, but because trust was absent. Trust does not mean neglect. It means appropriate engagement. You show up when needed, not constantly. You oversee, not obsess. This applies whether you are building something digital, owning assets, creating content, or stewarding opportunities. The form will vary, but the principle remains. Whatever God gives you is meant to multiply without consuming you. If it consumes you, it is out of order. There is also a call here to maturity. Passive income is not a shortcut for immaturity. It exposes it. When money flows without effort, your character is revealed. Your discipline is tested. Your motives surface. That is why some people lose what they gain quickly, not because they were unworthy, but because they were unprepared. Preparation does not always look like strategy. Sometimes it looks like learning to say no. Sometimes it looks like simplifying your life so abundance has somewhere to land. I had to learn this the hard way. There were moments when I thought I needed more income, but what I really needed was fewer distractions. When I removed unnecessary obligations, money stretched further. When I stopped chasing every idea, the right one grew. Focus is a form of faith. It says, I trust that what is meant for me will not require constant chasing. Chosen one, your nervous system matters. Your peace matters. God does not fund chaos. He funds clarity. When your inner world is orderly, provision aligns more easily. This is not mystical thinking. It is practical spirituality. A calm mind makes better decisions. A rested body discerns more accurately. A grounded spirit recognizes opportunity without desperation. Some of you are being invited into a quieter form of success, one that does not announce itself loudly but supports you steadily, one that allows you to be present with your family, your calling, your inner life. That kind of success does not impress the world, but it sustains the chosen. It gives you margin, and margin is where revelation comes. Do not rush this. Do not compare your path to anyone else's. The way provision enters your life will match your assignment. Some will build slowly, some will inherit unexpectedly, some will create, some will steward. The common thread is alignment. When heaven backs a structure, it holds. When fear builds a structure, it collapses. You are not behind. You are not late. You are standing at the threshold of a different relationship with money. One where it no longer dictates your mood or your worth. One where it serves, not rules. That shift begins internally before it manifests externally. Let go of the idea that struggle is proof of faithfulness. Faithfulness is obedience, not exhaustion. Sit with this truth: God does not need you anxious to keep you humble. He does not need you broke to keep you close. He desires partnership, not pressure. And when partnership is restored, provision follows naturally. Let this understanding settle into your spirit. Let it reframe how you see effort, rest, and trust. Because when the inner alignment locks into place, the outer structures begin to form almost effortlessly. Chosen one, there is a sacred responsibility that comes with clarity, and it is the responsibility to act without force. Many people misunderstand this stage. They think alignment means waiting endlessly for signs, while others think it means pushing aggressively to make something happen. Neither is true. Alignment is movement without strain. It is obedience without panic. It is action that feels grounded, not rushed. There was a time when I believed that if I did not push hard enough, nothing would move. That belief came from years of instability, not from truth. When you grow up or live in survival mode, you learn to associate urgency with safety. Stillness feels dangerous. Rest feels irresponsible. But once God begins shifting your financial foundation, He also retrains your nervous system. He teaches you how to move without adrenaline. That retraining is uncomfortable at first because it feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. This is where many chosen ones hesitate. They feel the call to build something that will support them long term, yet they hesitate because it does not feel dramatic enough. No emergency, no pressure, no external validation, just a quiet knowing that says, start here, build this, steward this. That voice is easy to ignore if you are addicted to intensity, but intensity is not the same as anointing. Passive income often begins in very ordinary ways. A simple structure, a modest system, a small stream. The ego looks at it and says, this is too small. The spirit looks at it and says, this is stable. Heaven rarely builds with spectacle, it builds with sustainability. The mustard seed was never impressive at the start. It was faithful. You may find yourself tempted to overcomplicate things, to add more steps, to chase more ideas, to think bigger before you have built deeper. Resist that urge. Depth comes before expansion, faithfulness before multiplication. When Jesus spoke about being faithful over little, He was not diminishing the little. He was honoring it. The little is where character is refined. The little is where discipline is proven. The little is where peace is tested. I have seen people abandon solid foundations because they looked too slow. I have also seen those same people return later exhausted, wishing they had stayed. Speed is seductive, but stability is liberating. When income flows without chaos, it frees your attention. When attention is free, discernment sharpens. When discernment sharpens, you make fewer mistakes. This is how heaven protects increase. Chosen one. Understand this, not every good idea is yours to carry. Some ideas will excite you but drain you. Others will seem plain but strengthen you. Learn to tell the difference. Excitement spikes quickly and fades. Peace settles slowly and stays. That is the metric. If something gives you energy without demanding constant vigilance, it is aligned. If something requires you to constantly check, worry, adjust, and fear loss, it will eventually cost you more than it gives. There is also a humility required at this stage. Passive income does not mean passive character. It requires responsibility, patience, and integrity. When money flows without constant labor, how you steward your time becomes visible. Do you invest it wisely, or do you numb yourself? Do you deepen your calling, or do you drift? Provision reveals priorities. That is why some people are delayed, not punished, prepared. I had to confront this in my own life. When time opened up, I realized how much of my identity was tied to busyness. Without constant tasks, I felt exposed. That was not a money issue, that was a self-worth issue. God was not just freeing my schedule, He was redefining my value. Many chosen ones fear passive income because it threatens their coping mechanisms. Struggle becomes familiar. Calm feels unsafe. But calm is where healing happens. This stage invites you to build from wholeness, not compensation. To create systems because they make sense, not because they prove something. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to fulfill your assignment. Money is simply one of the tools that supports that fulfillment. When it is placed in its proper position, it stops being emotional and starts being functional. Notice how much of your resistance is emotional rather than logical. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of responsibility, fear of rest. These fears do not disqualify you. They reveal where God is working. Do not shame yourself for them. Bring them into the light. Let them inform your pacing. Wisdom does not rush healing. It integrates it. Some of you are meant to build quietly for a long time before anything visible appears. That does not mean nothing is happening. Roots grow in silence. Infrastructure forms underground. When the time comes, what emerges looks sudden to others, but it will feel inevitable to you. That is how divine timing works. It feels late until it feels obvious. You may also notice that certain desires are falling away. The need to impress, the urge to compare, the hunger for recognition. This is not loss. This is refinement. As your income stabilizes, your motives clarify. You no longer need money to speak for you. You no longer need success to justify your choices. You begin to live more honestly. That honesty attracts the right opportunities and repels the wrong ones. Chosen one, do not underestimate the power of consistency. A small action taken faithfully will outproduce a grand vision never grounded. This applies to building income streams, creating assets, stewarding resources, and managing energy. Faithfulness compounds, anxiety depletes. Choose accordingly. There will be moments where nothing seems to move, where progress feels invisible, where doubt whispers that you are wasting time. In those moments, return to peace, not panic. Ask yourself, am I aligned or am I afraid? Fear always demands immediate action. Alignment allows patience. If peace remains, you are on track. This phase is about learning to trust structure over adrenaline, rhythm over reaction, sustainability over spectacle. You are not late. You are learning how to build something that can carry you without crushing you. That is wisdom. That is maturity. That is preparation. Let this truth anchor you. God is not in a hurry with your provision. He is invested in your stability. He would rather you build slowly and remain whole than rush and fracture. The wealth that lasts is the wealth that arrives when the soul is ready to hold it. Chosen one. As this season matures, you may begin to notice something subtle yet powerful shifting within you. The urgency that once drove your decisions is softening. The fear that once whispered, "What if it all falls apart?" is losing its authority. This is not because you have everything figured out, but because you are no longer letting anxiety lead. That is evidence of growth. That is evidence of alignment. At this stage, the work is no longer about discovering what to do. It is about trusting what you already know. Most chosen ones do not lack insight. They lack permission to act calmly. You have likely sensed more than once the direction you were meant to move in. The resistance did not come from confusion. It came from the fear of responsibility. Because once you build something that sustains you, there is no one left to blame. And that can feel heavy if you are not anchored. Responsibility when rooted in fear feels like a burden. Responsibility when rooted in purpose feels like stewardship. There is a difference. Stewardship assumes partnership. Burden assumes isolation. You were never meant to carry provision alone. You were meant to cooperate with it. Passive income is simply one of the ways that cooperation becomes visible. It is provision agreeing to meet you halfway. You may also notice that as financial pressure eases, emotional layers surface. Old grief, old disappointment, old exhaustion that was previously numbed by survival. Do not misinterpret this as regression. This is release. when the body no longer has to brace it, finally lets go. Healing often begins when the threat subsides. That is why rest can feel uncomfortable at first. It brings things to the surface that urgency kept buried. I remember reaching a point where my income stabilized enough that I could slow down. Instead of relief, I felt exposed. Without constant motion, I had to face parts of myself I had ignored. But that confrontation was a gift. It taught me that money was never the solution. It was the stabilizer that allowed deeper work to happen. And that deeper work changed everything. Chosen one. Your worth was never tied to your struggle. Struggle was simply the environment that trained you. But training seasons end, and when they do, clinging to them becomes self-sabotage. You do not honor your past by staying trapped in it. You honor it by building something better from what it taught you. There is a dignity in quiet provision, in knowing that the lights will stay on without panic, in knowing that you can say no without fear, in knowing that your spirit does not have to negotiate with your bank account before obeying God. That dignity is not arrogance, it is order restored. When money knows its place, peace follows. You may find that people around you do not understand this shift. Some may question why you are no longer rushing. Others may interpret your calm as complacency. Let them. Not everyone is meant to understand your rhythm. Some are still surviving, others are still striving. You are learning to steward. That is a different frequency. As this phase integrates, clarity will become more natural. Decisions will feel cleaner. You will sense when to move and when to wait without overthinking. This is what happens when the nervous system is no longer hijacked by fear. You become more intuitive, not less. More grounded, not detached. Money stops being emotional data and becomes neutral information. Chosen one let go of the idea that peace must be earned through exhaustion. Peace is not a prize, it is a posture. And when you adopt that posture, provision aligns with it. The systems you build, the assets you steward, the opportunities you accept will begin to reflect that internal order. You will attract less chaos and more consistency, less drama and more depth. There is also a quiet authority that emerges here. When you are no longer desperate, you are no longer easily manipulated. You negotiate differently, you partner differently, you invest differently. You are not swayed by promises that sound good but feel wrong. Discernment sharpens when fear loosens its grip. This is how chosen ones avoid traps that others fall into repeatedly. You are not meant to hoard. You are meant to circulate wisely. When income flows predictably, generosity becomes intentional rather than impulsive. You can give without resenting, support without draining, serve without self-betrayal. That is the difference between burnout and blessing. One depletes the source, the other multiplies it. Some of you are still waiting for a dramatic confirmation before you allow yourselves to relax. But peace rarely arrives with spectacle. It arrives quietly, then stays. If you keep waiting for fireworks, you may miss the steady light that is already present. Look at your life honestly. Where has pressure decreased? Where has clarity increased? Where have doors opened without force? These are signs of alignment. Do not underestimate the power of stability. Stability gives you longevity. It allows you to show up consistently, not just intensely. And consistency is what builds trust both internally and externally. Trust compounds, just like income, just like faith, just like peace. Chosen one. This is not the end of your growth. It is the end of unnecessary struggle. You are stepping into a relationship with money that is mature, grounded, and ordered. One where it no longer defines you, distracts you, or drains you. One where it supports what you are here to do. Let that truth settle into your body. not as an idea but as permission. Permission to stop worrying, permission to build calmly, permission to rest without guilt. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are stepping into stewardship. And stewardship, when embraced fully, always creates room for both provision and presence to coexist. Chosen one, take a moment and let this settle in your spirit. What has been spoken over you today is not motivation, and it is not coincidence. This is confirmation. You are standing in your exact kairos moment, the appointed time where heaven and earth align to shift your relationship with provision. The pressure you carried is lifting because a new order is being established. A supernatural transfer is already in motion, and it is unfolding with precision, not haste. Anointed one, you are not stepping into chaos, but into calm authority. What you build from this point forward will not drain you, it will sustain you. What flows toward you will no longer compete with your peace. Receive this as a blessing. May anxiety lose its voice, may clarity sharpen your discernment, and may provision rise quietly and faithfully around your life. You are not behind, you are not late, you are right on time. Stay aligned. Remain faithful to the rhythm you have been given. Let gratitude guide your steps as what has been prepared begins to manifest. And if this word resonated in your spirit, you are welcome to subscribe so we remain connected in this flow. You may also write 777 in the comments as agreement and share this message if you feel led. Go forward in peace. What has been set in motion will not return empty.